Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first lecture of developmental psychology. So I'm also going to post a general syllabus lecture, which is what I am doing in the in-person class. So if you go to the in-person class this week, I'm just covering the syllabus and talking about the class. If you are unable to attend, I know there's some people that are out, or some people that are only taking the course remotely, or some people that may be sick, or whatever the case may be. Just go online, go on D2L, and find the syllabus lecture that I will post on Friday, I imagine. But this is the start here of the course material. I'm going to keep this rather short today. Just cover a couple slides just because I want to see. I'm trying out some new software. I'm trying out a new setup. So I want to make sure everything is working before going for too long and maybe potentially wasting time on this. So starting out, developmental psychology. So the first chapter, read the chapter when you get a chance. The first chapter just kind of goes over, it's a broad overview of what developmental psychology is. So we can define developmental psychology as the scientific study of the ways people change and the ways they stay the same from conception until death. So important words italicized here, scientific study. So psychology is the science. We use the scientific method to understand human development. And this is a really broad class. Like I said in the in-person class, or what's in the syllabus, is we tend to call this womb to tomb psychology. So from conception, from the first stages of life until death. And we might even go prior to conception, because that's an important time in development as well. In the development of a person, what happens to the mother prior to conception can influence the development of the child, who then grows into an adult. For example, if the mother has the flu prior to conception, if she has I don't know, COVID, who knows? We don't know how that's going to affect people, if there are effects on a developing fetus down the road. For people who have had COVID, there's all these long hauler symptoms associated with the disease. So there could be something there too. If the mother has depression we know. If they have chronic depression or a depressive episode prior to conception, that also can influence the developing fetus, who then turns into a developing child and eventually an adult. But point being with the slide is that we are studying people across the lifespan, and we're using a systematic method to do that as developmental psychologists. And again, this course is real broad. Usually a developmental psychologist will focus on a particular time in life. So much research has been done at the earliest stages of life. Childhood developmental psychology is well studied and has been for many years. There's neglected stages of life. There's not a whole lot of research on middle age and what happens during the middle age years. It's the longest time in a person's life, and there's the least amount of research in developmental psychology about that time. Is what it is, and I think it's starting to change a little bit. There have been calls for research on this time of life and everything, but it's relatively understudied. The last stage of life in older adulthood, that's studied a lot too, because there is so much change occurring. So a lot of different, we're declining in all sorts of ways, physically, cognitively. So that's well studied. There are diseases, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disorder. They're fairly common in um, people who are in older adult stage of life that have an enormous impact on their lives and lives of those close to them. So that's also an area that's pretty well studied in developmental psychology. So we take the perspective that development is lifelong. So it's not that you just reach a certain age and then your development stops. You don't become an adult and all of a sudden you're done developing. Not even close. Don't even stop developing in certain ways. It's not like you reach the peak of your physical development and that's it. No, you probably actually start decline then, or you can start developing in other ways. Or as far as like our cognitive development goes, we start seeing a decline in some cognition in our early to mid adult years. We start slowing down our processing speed, that sort of thing. But we also start increasing in other ways, like just our accumulated knowledge. We can draw on our experiences more, become more mature, have more wisdom, that sort of thing. Development is multi-directional, meaning that we are developing in some ways. We are increasing function in some ways, whether it be physical, cognitive, social, but also we show declines in other ways. Even going into our adolescent years, well, we actually are showing a decline in those years in the number of neurons or the number of synaptic connections that our neurons make, and that's a process of our brain becoming more efficient. So in our early childhood years, we're just growing tons and tons of neuronal connections, synapses with other neurons. But by the time we reach adolescence, we've pruned back a large chunk of those in order to make more efficient connections in our brains. And development is multidimensional in that we develop in all sorts of ways, physically, cognitively, psychosocially. Development is multidisciplinary. So we can approach development from all sorts of academic specializations. There are just developmental psychologists. Neuroscientists work a lot on development, biological and psychological development. Neuroscientists do a lot of the work on diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Obviously, anyone in the health sciences field works not necessarily as a developmental scientist, but should know about the different stages of the life and changes are occurring and declines and all of that sort of stuff. Development is characterized by plasticity. So by plasticity, we mean our ability to change and adapt. And we talk about plasticity broadly in just the idea that we change and adapt to our circumstances, and that may be determined by our level of resilience. But also, plasticity has a very specific meaning from a neuroscientific perspective. Plasticity refers to the brain's ability to make new synapses, to make new connections among neurons, so that if there's damage to one part of the brain, other parts of the brain can quickly pick up that, well, not necessarily quickly, depending on the damage and everything, but other parts of the brain can pick up the function of the damaged part. And we especially see this in children. Children have very plastic brains, and goes back to just what I said about the whole process of synaptic pruning. They're making so many of their connections more efficient And along with that, they then have the ability, if there's damage to any area, their brain quickly works around that to compensate for any injuries. Children can sustain quite quite a lot of damage, like actual physical damage to the structure of their brain, and still have normal brain functioning. And that's the process of plasticity. It's just the neurons just like branching out and making connections with other neurons. If one's damaged, just branches out somewhere else to make another connection with the neuron. I mean, the neurons themselves just transmit electricity. It's not like a neuron is transmitting a thought or an emotion. It's just that the neurons, I guess, they learn associations from patterns of firing that make up everything, our whole conscious experience. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that one particular part of the brain has only one function. Other parts can pick up some function here and there, to an extent. Now, there's probably tons of caveats with that, and probably a lot that I'm not quite aware of, and I'll try to provide more information as we go along in the course, and as I read more and learn more myself. But it's an evolving science that we're just really starting to understand the power of plasticity in the brain. Okay, so that is enough here. Like I said, I wanted to just keep this first lecture short just to test out my equipment, make sure it's recording properly and everything. So I'm going to leave that first lecture right here, just ranting about a few different things. And I will I'll do a bit longer lecture next time, pick this up in a day or two. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye.